the purpose of the Tea House Hill Tales and Trails is to retrace the footsteps of Dr. Grenfell, of course. Well, back in the day, of course, water was very important, and not every household had water running to or access. They all had their own wells. And of course, they had to bring the water first when the Grenfells came in here. They had to bring the water to the house and boil it on the stove, the same as they did. And it wasn't easy bringing the water. So we're going to Tea House Hill, and it gets its name because at the end of the workday, they had a tea house up on Tea House Hill, and the workers and Dr. Grenfell, many of the times, they had access to the tea house after work, and they would have little meetings and little workshops up there and discuss the business of the day. They would have to bring water. Whoever was taking care of the stove and the water would bring the water up, probably in a water ring like this.
All right.
Yeah, so do it.
All right.
Like that. And then you take up the two handles.
We'll take the two handles.
And that's how you brought your water.
Oh, very good.
And you didn't have your rubber boots full of water by the time you
That's
got to where
very
you're going.
smart. Yeah.
This is the story of Drift on an ice floe. As it was to cross these white hills, which you see in right this way in that direction. It happened on an Easter Sunday in 1908. Dr. Grenfell had come back from having prayers at the United Church, and he was walking up to the hospital, the main entrance of the hospital, to check on his patients before he had a rest in the afternoon. And as he was walking up, he was approached by two people that came from Ingalee area, came over on dog team, because we all know that during that time the two modes of transportation was either by boat in the spring, summer, and fall, and in the winter it was just dog team. And so they said, Doctor, they said, Charlie is not going to make it tonight if you can't come and see him. And because he had been operated on previous the week before or whatever, and he had an infection. They thought he was going to die. And Dr. Grenfell had a history with that family because their father had drowned the year before on his dog team during the winter. So he was very compassionate about this young guy. So the guys that came on the dog team said, well, we're going to give our dogs a rest, and you can go on ahead. Dr. Grenfell says yes. They said, but be careful. Don't cross the water, follow the land. And of course, Dr. Grenfell traveled so far that night on his dog team, and they stopped in. They had tilts along the way where they could rest their dogs and rest for a while. And he took a rest, and then he went out. It was early in the wee hours in the morning, and he continued on his way. And he was looking to make up time so that he made sure he got to this young guy, Charlie. He looked at the ice, and of course during the night it gets cold again, so he gets this fish over the top, a skim of ice over the top, and he said he thought he could make it. So him and his dog team ventured out on the ice, and he wasn't very far off the shore, but he couldn't get back to the land. And his dog team went into the water, and he went into the water, and they crawled up on an ice pan. And he...
the dogs too?
The dogs did. Actually, he cut hold to the rope that the tracer that the dogs were attached to. And they got up on the ice pan, and he pulled himself up. Anyway, during the night, well, everything they had was lost because the sleighs went into... He cut the tracers from the dogs so that they wouldn't be pulled down. Went into the water. And the dogs and him were on the ice pan. It was getting cold and getting colder. And I'm not going to tell you every note in the story. And when I tell this story to my grade 3s when I was teaching in St. Anthony Elementary, I would leave out the gory parts. And Anyway, during the night he got really cold. He was really determined to survive. And Dr. Grenfell had ordered a group of reindeer to be brought here, and there was 2 families of Laplanders came with the reindeer, and they showed him some survival methods, and one was taking the straw, the harness of the dog was straw inside. Cut the straw of the harnesses open, and his boots were wet, all of his clothes was wet, and they took the straw and put it in the bottom of his boots to help try to save his feet. And then it was getting colder and colder, and he had to sacrifice 3 of his dogs, and he took the fur of the dog and pulled it over himself and made a sort of a jacket so that he could survive. He was out all night, and he was drifting into open water. Now, meanwhile, in Ingalee area, Mainbrook area, there was a man who went out at the head of the land, it says, to retrieve some meat. And I'm thinking he had a dog team too, because he probably had seal carcass that they would save for food for their dogs for the winter. And he went out to get some, and he thought he saw something out on the ice. So he went back, and he informed the community, and people were aware that Dr. Grenfell was coming to save this young man, see what he could do for this young man, Charlie. So it was too stormy, they couldn't go out in the night, but the next morning they went out, and Dr. Grenfell was in a very bad state, and they rescued him. And when they took him in, he had frozen feet, 2 of his feet. There was frostburn in both of his feet and both of his hands. And now he survived though, and he did well after that harrowing experience. And here, the rock right here, during the time of Dr. Grenfell, a tea house was built on this hill overlooking St. Anthony Harbour. The staff would come and enjoy the view and have a quiet cup of tea after a busy day at work. Unfortunately, the building was destroyed by fire, and the cornerstone is all that is left. And that would be the cornerstone right there. And it was just a rough shed, but it served its purpose.